Jess, I remember seeing you at IDEA, where I see a lot of people. And he said, got to do this podcast thing. And I was like, I'm going to remember this. We're going to do it. And here we are.
We made it. We made it. I remember it was IDEA last year. I met you through Alex McLean and Michael Piercy, who are two amazing presenters. And it has taken us a year, but we did it this time.
You know what it is too? These guys, they'll know too. Like it's usually many months before I book someone. I'll book them and then it doesn't happen for many months because it's always like we were just talking off camera. It just comes together for me. I do stuff. I don't plan a lot of stuff. I'll plan the booking. Then after that, it just comes when it comes for that. So
It feels very authentic. It's
yeah,
meant to just happen. The conversation just flows. It doesn't feel so scripted. And like we were talking about before,
yeah,
oftentimes we're put in those positions where it's highly scripted. And so it's nice
yeah.
to just actually let it flow.
I think so. I always say this to people when I go, I don't know, if I go meet someone for coffee, I don't have a bunch of questions in front of me. Don't you think? I feel like that's weird. If someone showed up to you and they were like, Jess, I have 10 questions. We have to stick to this script. I just met you. You're like, okay, this is a little strange. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it makes me put on a different persona too, right? Like I have to feel like I'm guarding my personal self and I have to put that presenter hat on. And so the conversation doesn't necessarily flow because I'm looking for what the end game is. And whereas this is just very much open.
Yeah. It's just open. It reminds me of I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine who teaches Group X at a college here. We're like, what's like a thing? You get there, you put it on 11 and you become this character. I was like, see, that's why I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a character. Like, I don't want that. You know?
And sometimes you have different avatars, right? Because it's
Yeah,
based on what class you're teaching or location you're teaching at. You try to, in group fitness,
yeah,
mold yourself to your audience. It
yeah.
does feel very much a play, an actor play that you play all these parts and it's just you amped up a little bit.
Amped up. Yeah, so that's like my podcast. I'm like trying to get the least of that as possible. Like I was like, okay, who am I actually getting here? Hopefully, it's the most authentic version of themselves. Maybe not all the way, but we're gonna get close. We're gonna get close
I
for
love
that.
that.
So let's get close, Jess. Let's get and yeah, let's get close. So I think a good place to start again, because I never know where I'm going, is just it's good for the people who listen to know a little bit about the person I'm talking to. So it'd be great for the people to know a little bit about Jess and this fitness journey you're on.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Jess Maurer. I am a fitness business consultant and I help people go from feeling overwhelmed to feeling organized. I work with entrepreneurs on a local level and larger companies like Fit for Mom, where I'm the director of fitness education. I help consult to bring new certifications to market, such as the Mental Wellbeing Association's brand new certification on helping fitness professionals understand mental wellness. And I also work with industry legends like Mindy Milray to create our brand new program called the Move Mentors, where we're collected everything Mindy's done over the past 2 decades and put it in one place so it's easy for everyone to find and reference. But that really is my goal in the fitness industry is to help people feel less overwhelmed, stay away from burnout so that they have a career of sustainability and longevity in a way that makes them feel organized. I hate using the word term balance because I don't like the idea of personal and professional balance. That's not necessarily something anyone is ever going to achieve. But instead, I like the idea of being able to reach your full potential by feeling organized and moving away from the feeling of overwhelm.
What's the full potential for our industry, you think?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think we have to stop gatekeeping fitness behind this like lock and key concept. And we need to start encouraging a blend of exercise movement throughout the day so that we're not just seen as those people who stand at the front of the room in leg warmers with a microphone or that coach who stands there with a clipboard and a timer, but we're instead seen for people that advocate more movement because movement makes us feel good. it's hard to join a gym and stay motivated because the idea is in 6 weeks, you might lose 2 pounds. And it's so far away. And there seems to be so much work and time and effort and energy involved in it. It's not motivational. But if we flip the script to being, hey, you're going to feel better immediately after this movement session, you're going to feel calmer. You're not going to, go out there and stab someone on the subway. You're going to be in more control of your mind and your
Oh,
emotions if we just go on this walk together. Like, it's science-based saying of you're going to feel better after this one movement session. So let's move more. Let's find joy in movement again. Less being about sets and reps and more being about enjoying the activity.
so do you think what's keeping us from this movement towards this potential is some of this kind of the sets and reps mentality, or what's keeping us from getting to where we should be?
Change is hard. Evolution is hard, right? And I think that every industry has this turnover rate every like 10 to 15 years. And we in the fitness industry are at that point. Imagine what it was like when companies like Les Mills came into existence and said, hey, I know you've been choreographing and coming up with your own playlists and exercises for 15 years, but you should stop doing that and only do our pre choreographed stuff. We're going to tell you what to do. Well, that was a huge changeover in our industry. And I think 15 years later, we saw it again with the idea of Beachbody and other infomercial like programs coming to the forefront of, you don't have to go to a gym. We'll deliver the gym to you. There was another huge change. And I think we're seeing that again in the fitness industry where we're seeing it's about 15 years later, 20 years later, and we're having this kind of identity crisis of, okay, we're middle aged. How do we buy a Porsche? How do we go tour the Caribbean for a week? We're having this mentality of it's a changing of the guard. Change is hard. And how can we go into it with open arms and really want to bring the next generation of movers forward and into our industry? I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago where it was about, hey, stop panicking. Like, for those of you who are in management, for those of you who have the position of being mentors, stop panicking. There's enough people on the planet for all of us to have some type of influence. And let's figure out how to work collaboratively together.
Let's talk about this panic. I want to hear more about this. Let's dive deeper into the mechanics of the panicking. What has been your experience with hearing about this? I don't know that I've heard this panicking before.
Yeah, I think it comes from the idea of scarcity. Of there's only a small amount of people who work out at gym facilities or go to boutique studios or hire personal trainers, and we're all
Mm,
fighting over that small 24% of
mm.
Americans. Instead of looking at, okay, there's 24 that are coming. How do we encourage the rest of these people to come in? How do we help them find what feels good for their body? What helps them achieve their level of happiness or their level of calmness through their day? And maybe your CrossFit gym doesn't speak to 10 to 20% of your community. And that speaks, they would rather go to a yoga studio or a mind body studio, and being okay with that instead of panicking up, I got to find leads. I got to find leads. I got to find leads. It's not about that. It's instead of really about helping somebody find their right place to be. And
Yeah.
instead of holding people so close to their heart, it's instead going to somebody and being like, hey, you know what? You might actually want to go try that yoga studio down the street. Or the yoga being like, you might want to go over there and try the CrossFit studio down the street.
Yeah, I think sometimes as an industry, we hold on to our corner of the industry really tight. It's you think about it, uh, there's various pathways for people to be involved in movement, exercise, physical activity. But sometimes we're our worst enemies. We shame other professionals for moving into different spaces, whether it's the virtual space or whether it's just a yoga space or whether it's just a health coaching space. It's like, why are we fighting each other about this?
Absolutely. We should be working a bit more collaboratively together instead of worrying so much about, like you said, our little corner.
Yeah. And these are nice areas we're in, but I think that also we spend too much time in kind of our own little silos as people. And It's if someone tells me, like, I don't have a lot of friends. Have you tried to find more friends? Have you actually met a lot of people? No. You have to meet people if you want things to happen. Now, I think fitness people are so guilty of this for being such a very, hey, we're helping people. We don't meet each other enough.
Absolutely.
We're like, do our own thing. Well, if you wanted to be a better industry, you got to meet other people and talk about what each other does and look, generally want to help each other.
I agree. And I think there's something so special about finding sister businesses in your area that you can unite and partner with people who are serving the same target demographic that you're interested in, but doing it in a different manner, a different way. So if you do own a yoga studio, going out into your community and finding out who owns the local juice shop or coffee shop down the street from you and working out some type of partnership where it's collaborative together. Or if you own your own group fitness studio, going in with a massage therapist or a chiropractor because you know that eventually someone is going to get injured in your place. So let's find ways that you say, oh, your neck's bothering you. This is who I recommend. This is who you should go to. And making it about a whole person and not just about what the person can do physically.
Yeah, most definitely. And one thing, when I was in Vegas for about 13 years, I ran a club, like a private club in a community. And I used to know all the fitness directors at all the different clubs in Las Vegas. And I would go visit them. And I would say, there's one thing I want to do is in the olive branches. If I don't have the capability of hiring someone on my staff because we're at our budget, whatever, I want to make sure they have a job. They come interview with me. So I need to have other directors I know that I could send them to for potential work for that. And they always thought this was such a novel idea. So we're just helping each other. It's like, what is it? How powerful that is that if someone who wants to get a job in our business can't get one at one facility, but the person at that facility goes, but I know someone else who's looking for work. And that's a goodwill gesture. We're in this together.
Yeah, and it builds a relationship with you, the manager who didn't hire that instructor is only going to speak well about you and your facility. They're not going to be mad that you didn't hire them because you
Yeah.
did help them. And we do have a retention issue in the industry. We don't have enough people who are newly coming in and getting certification and continuing that certification. And so the idea of like when you find this up and coming instructor being able or trainer being able to share them with other facilities will help us sustain an industry for a longer period of time.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm curious about what you've thought about the essential nature of our business since the pandemic during that time and how we can make ourselves more essential.
I really think it comes down to the fact of most people, again, CSS sets and reps. So if we can change the mentality that it's not just about fitness, but it's about well being, it's about seeing the person as a human and not just a body in your classroom. I've worked for a lot of clubs before where the amount of people in class were more important than who actually was in class. And I think if we flip the script and start focusing more on who is it that's coming? Who is it that's coming regularly? Who is just a drop in? How can we nurture and cultivate these sometimes people into regular people? If we could start having conversations about who is in the room, not the amount of people in the room, then we can really start to become more integral and integrate in people's daily lives into their habits. People want to be seen. They want to be known and remembered. And by just ignoring the ones in the middle or ignoring the ones in the back, we're doing a disservice. We want to make sure that in all gym facilities that we're really paying attention to the people who are walking in, not just how many are walking in.
Do you think that's influenced, though, by the leadership in the different facilities and how they're looking at it?
1,000% yes. Because numbers do equate to revenue on some cases, right? So they're like less personal time means that you can spend more time working. But really, it's the more time you spend personally connecting with someone, the more likely they're going to be a sustained member. And as we know, looking at studies of the past 20 years, retaining members saves you money in the long run because constantly having to advertise to bring in new members is 3 times more expensive. So we can start focusing on the retention efforts, not just the acquisition efforts, then we can over time see that there is a direct revenue line. I think it also comes to the fact that a lot of gym owners, franchise owners, managers of facilities aren't physically in the facilities anymore. A lot of times, what we're seeing in these big gyms on big franchises is that the owners, the CEOs, if you will, aren't involved in the day to day. And when you're not really involved with the day to day and the people who are walking in and the ones that are on the front lines, you, you are disconnected from your culture and you are actually disconnected from the people that you serve. Everything does really look like a number. I think the more that franchise owners, studio owners, gym owners can be involved in locations physically, then the more success that they'll see in their staff and in their retention efforts.
Why do you think they're not there as often?
I think there was a huge save the gym mentality that happened in 2020 and 2021 where a lot of people consolidated and at the same time realized that they can work remotely. They could live in Florida and own all these gyms in Colorado without ever having to interact. And I think that there is a blend that we need to have between automation, delegation, and humanity. And if we can take those two things and blend them together, even if it's just visiting the location that you own once a quarter, it's enough to change that team culture to being like, it's not just people and numbers. Excuse me, it's not just numbers and revenue, it is people.
Isn't that funny? Even just think about what you said, just at least once a quarter. Like,
Once every 3 months.
wow, man. I remember when I worked for this same club and this very large company and like luxury spa, fitness, wellness. And my supervisor would come by once a month. He was a
Mhm.
VP in the company and it made all the difference in the world. Our client, the developer always saw this person. And it was huge in terms of retaining the account on a regular basis because there were these touch points on a regular basis or phone calls on a regular basis. And I think in anything in life, you have to show up. You have to be present. Well, it's very difficult to be good at any relationship if you're not present.
It's 100% true. And if you are kept behind this like lock and key idea. So I think the more that if you own a fitness franchise, go into your facility, be a part of the culture, be a part of the members and the people that work for you. It's really important.
Let's turn to conferences because that's where you and I have met and chatted in person. What's your feeling on the current state of fitness conferences?
I think that we are seeing a need for change throughout the industry. The way of doing conferences prior to the pandemic is no longer what the industry wants or needs. I think that there are a lot of sister companies that are doing some really revolutionary things when it comes to live education and live experiences because they've been willing to do things in a very disruptive manner. They're willing to tell old partners and old sponsors that they're no longer interested in going the same route, that they're gonna completely turn it on its head. And it's the reason why things are being successful. There's a number of different yoga conferences that are incorporating the instructors with the consumers. They're bringing in everyone to have an experience together instead of it being only pros should come to this. It's really about everyone in the community experiencing it. There's a lot of people who are changing their idea of different tracks. If you look at some of the bigger conferences, there's 15 sessions offered at one time. There's some people that are really leading the industry that are saying, no, we're all going to be together in one. We're all coming together in one big giant room. We're all going to see the same conversations and have great dialogue based on what we're experiencing instead of it being so segmented out. I also think there's some really cool conferences that are going to be coming to the forefront. Don't just feature fitness, that incorporate the idea of, hey, here's a makeup artist that's going to come in and show you how to look better on camera and on social media. And here's a photographer that's going to teach you how to film and how to pose for your marketing purposes. And here's a TED Talk experience about helping you understand your sales funnel so that it's broader than the way that fitness has been isolated down and really expanding who is there, what is offered in a way that makes sense for a lot of different people interested.
That was brilliant, by the way. That was literally like, it was like 1, 2, 3. Here's what's happening. Here's what could be happening. I have been such a proponent of just like whipping it up, like changing it, all these things. And one of my ideas is to start infiltrating other conferences that are not fitness conferences.
I
So,
love
for
that.
example, I've submitted with a co-presenter of mine who is a fitness person who's also a psychedelic integration coach,
Mm,
and we're presenting fitness-based research with psychedelic research and psychedelic conferences. That's the goal. And to get
mhm.
fitness into a different medium to spread it beyond just fitness conferences. And to do it that way, I said, we got, there's no, you can only go to so many conferences for fitness. And it's honestly, it's usually the same people. Honestly, it's really like the same stuff. That's boring to me. I want to experience other things like my podcast. I talk to all the different people. I'm like, all right, who else is out there? What else is? And that's just one example, but I think that there's some cross pollination and we need to be open to that with conferences. And you mentioned bringing some people from other places into our space. And that's what I see would be really beneficial.
I agree. I think the MLM companies have giant conferences every year where we're starting to see more of that idea. I loved your verbiage and cross
Yeah.
pollination. That's really what we're starting to see there. So figuring out what are our sister like companies, and then how can we unite together in order to facilitate things that are not just the classic fitness conferences that we've always had, but how have you as a fitness presenter can go into other worlds.
I'd almost like to see at fitness conferences much more therapy based stuff. I would love to have some version of group therapy within the conference, having professionals be more exposed to it, just whatever. Because what we currently do is, hey, get your headshot. Here's, which is fine and stuff like that. Try this new piece of equipment. But wait, if we're going to be like a wellness, really into wellness and a larger holistic thing, we should be exposing our professionals to really different stuff. Or then maybe they're like, I never thought about this as being part of my business. Or I don't know.
I think about BetterHelp all the time. I do work in a mom space for part of my career with Fit for Mom, and every new instructor that I meet and or new franchisee in the Fit for Mom space, I always recommend if you're not a member of BetterHelp yet, you should be, because being a mom is hard, being a fitness professional is hard, and it's always great to have someone you can talk to throughout this whole process. And so I love the idea of it being much more therapeutic in nature, whether it's talk therapy. We're hosting an amazing psychologist in a few weeks at the Mental Wellbeing Association. Dr. Celine is going to come in and speak to us about disordered eating and body dysmorphia, specifically to fitness professionals. Like, how do you recognize your own disordered eating habits? And then how do you stop from passing those on to your personal training client?
I love
I,
that. That
it's
is
going to
so
be
important.
so good.
I think I just like being transparent and honest. I just think we spend too much time in these conferences helping people to work out. Like
Mhm.
fitness professionals come and they just work out like 15 times. And I feel like that's really not the point. Like you're already doing that or some version of that. Come there to experience something different that will be very like, I'm big on a work on yourself. Come there to get this therapeutic healing, to work on yourself. What you mentioned about disorder, recognizing that in yourself. How many fitness professionals you know suffer from that?
All
And
of it.
then are so jaded by it, they just talk to their clients about it, and then they just it's this weird cycle. And so we need to stop this. You need to work on this. You
Mhm.
cannot
And
bring
it
this
just
messiness.
and it ripples out, right? Because we as the fitness professional are seen as a guru most of the time to our clients, right? And so what we are saying, our clients are taking to heart and our clients are then passing it on. And we're just going to keep having these societal standards that are not healthy for anyone. So I love the idea of breaking the habit of it a little bit and exposing the bad habits that we might have as fitness
Yeah.
professionals and how do we move forward?
Michael Piercy, who said it really well in one of these committee meetings I had one time with IDEA, he said, I think we have to be okay with hurting ourselves in these conferences a little bit. We're going to have to be okay with changing and doing something really different, even if it hurts us a little
Mhm.
bit. And I
I
thought, that's just brilliant. That's brilliant, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to what can I do? I want to go to a conference. I want to be a participant in something that's going to help my business for the long term. Teaching a new class isn't necessarily going to help my business on the long term. However, learning how to do taxes, that would have really helped in the beginning. That would have saved me a ton of headache. If there had been just a great speaker to come in and tell you about how do you set up an LLC, how do
Mhm.
you know what taxes that you're filing? Should you do quarterly? Should you do yearly? All these things that are very specific of running a business, I think would be astronomically attended at a lot of these events.
I was saying, I think at this past idea in my presentation, but to other people, I was like, I think one of the big heartburn issues for fitness professionals is healthcare because there's so many people working self-employed. And I said, yeah, the thing is, someone should come in and I said, I could do this, but because I own a couple businesses, listen, if you're by yourself and you are self-employed, you can go into the marketplace in your specific state. And depending on how much revenue you're making, all that, you can get actually pretty decent healthcare. You don't
Mhm.
have to work for someone to get healthcare. And a lot of fitness pros just don't know that.
No,
They
have
they
no idea.
rely on it for the employer to give it to them versus going through the marketplace and seeing in many ways you can get such low cost to almost no cost healthcare. It's pretty decent, at least initially. As you make more money, maybe that changes, but there's no one doing that at conferences. Nothing. I don't even know
No.
if they're presenting, if people are submitting for that type of stuff.
We know what you're submitting for next year.
I'm submitting
I'm
a
going to go
lot of
in with
stuff.
taxes. You go in with healthcare.
Yeah. It's a big pain
Yeah.
point, right? For a lot of gig
Mhm.
workers or self-employed people. People are making decisions in the United States based off of the healthcare they can get from an employer or not. You know,
And if you don't want to work at that facility anymore and you're only doing it for healthcare, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be looking for
completely.
a career change, and we're not going to keep you in the fitness industry. So, knowing what your options are help really empower you into a more sustainable and enjoyable career.
Most definitely. It's so funny. We're talking about that. And I just feel like when I go to conference and I tell people, they're like, yeah, we should be talking about it. Like, why are we talking? What is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's why I like having these conversations. Like, okay, maybe there's a different way, different
Mhm.
opportunity. And the disruption aspect you talked about, I think is certainly needed as we enter this next phase. So let me ask you, where, just this is purely speculation, obviously, but everyone's educated guess, where are we going, you think, in our industry? Outside of just maybe a more wellness holistic, where else do you think we're going?
I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration. I think it's going to be a lot less about, I only teach this. I am only this. I think we're going to have to get rid of the term just. And I think it's been something that's been bubbling up for many years now. And the pandemic kind of slowed it down a little bit. But this idea of, I just teach Zumba, I just teach yoga, I just personally train here makes us seem very limited in our scope and that we are only talented in this thing. I think instead we need to start thinking about fitness trainers and group fitness instructors as presenters, as speakers, as people who have something to say in a way that's easily digestible and that people are interested in. While there's a very small amount of Americans that actually go to gym facilities, those who go listen. So almost thinking about your fitness trainer, your fitness instructors as like micro influencers, and how can we start micro influencing to start rippling out into bigger places? And as we've tap danced and talked about in this podcast is really about we need to be in other spaces. So you need to be talking to the psychedelic group. We need to be going to nutritional conferences. We need to be involved in college conferences. We need to be involved in MLMs. We need to go into CEO and executive suites and strategic coaches and have them bringing in fitness professionals because fitness professionals are wellness and movement professional speakers. They are talented, they can do more than just count to 8 and move to the beat of the music. If you think about it, a great fitness instructor does a lot more, spins a lot more plates during that 1 hour session than a TED Talk person does.
Oh,
TED Talk doesn't even have to hold the mic, right?
for
But the great fitness instructor is like paying attention to everyone, knowing names, knowing kids' names, keeping choreography straight, knowing what beat to drop in on what. Like so much is happening. So give them a mic and let them talk about what they're passionate about. You're going to see a really dynamic experience. And that's where we need to be opening up fitness professionals to.
How do we encourage this collaboration more and steer people towards it?
I think you're 100% on board because you've already mentioned that you did it, but you need to just apply.
Yeah.
Stop thinking that the only people we can apply to have fitness in the word
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
we need to just start going out there and applying. I think with the big trend of corporate wellness, we're gonna start seeing this more. But fitness professionals that I meet with all the time, and we're trying to plan what their exit strategy is of I'm teaching 30 classes a week. I can't keep doing this. How do I start moving into something more sustainable? Okay, what are you really passionate about? And let's create a presentation around what you're really passionate about so that we can start shipping that out to your community. Who do you know in your community? Who are you connected with? If you're not connected with someone in your physical community, join Toastmasters, join the Chamber of Commerce, go out and meet your sister organizations and start, like you mentioned, making friends. So don't be afraid to apply for something that doesn't have the word fitness in it and then go meet people, go talk to people and make friends.
The going, talking to people part, I think, is so critical. And I think it's morphed to what it used to be. I remember probably 15, 20 years ago, that talking was a lot of networking, going to mixers and stuff like that. In Vegas, it was crazy. You're going to nightclubs and they would host and stuff. It was like wild stuff. But now you can do it in so many different formats. But I think especially our very young people who are in the industry, they struggle with that talking connection, which is so strange to me. Actually, start a conversation. How do I do that? Like, kids are bad at it too. These kids, man, they're terrible. They're horrible.
My son just started middle school. And so every day before school, I'd be like, hey, what are you going to say when you meet someone new? And he parrots back to me, hi, my name is Sage. That is what we need to be teaching people how to do it. And so it goes back to teaching even these young professionals that are starting in the fitness industry that we really need to mentor and cultivate is, hey, you say, hi, my name is Jess. That's how you start conversations. But to your point, it's just like teaching our younger generation kids. It's
Yeah.
it's same mentality. I felt really awkward in a lot of meet and greet situations when I was first starting. And the best thing I'd ever done was join Toastmasters. I
Yep.
think Toastmasters was such an incredible way for me to understand that everybody else felt the exact same way that I felt.
Yeah.
And so it was a wonderful way for me to come out of my speaking shell a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We think we're all here together on this planet, but we all are really worried about what other people think of us when we meet them and how we look and how we feel. It's like, how do I start this whole thing? And certainly this much younger generation now, they're really struggling with it. One, it's a technological thing. It's lack of connection over a couple years ago and all that. But being good at just, hey, let's talk about something and let's just chat is really an incredible skill. Maybe one of the best skills you can have in life, which is why I have no script because I always want to sharpen the sword of conversation. I feel like
Um,
if I have a script, I am blunting my ability to be able to just freestyle conversation for that. So I just try to, oh, and if you do it enough, it just becomes natural for you. So I feel like if I have too much structure in my conversation, it kills honestly, my charisma. As the kids say, it kills the riz, man. It kills
it's
the
so
riz,
true.
right?
It's very true because then you're worried about hitting the mark or did I say that right? And now you've overthought it versus when you're just being authentic and being yourself. Like we had scripted this out. We had been talking about like my favorite onboarding systems and my favorite lead generation and how we talk about being organized in your CRM. And instead we're talking about really amazing, important content about, hey, what are we going to do moving forward to ensure that in 20 years we still have people coming into the industry
Yeah,
excited about being in the industry.
that's right. And talking's a big part of it. You talk a lot. It just reminds me of, I always have this examples like, I love the movie Office Space from back in the day. It's like a cult hit. It's so great. And I love that part when Orlando, I can't remember his last name, but he comes to the door selling something and he's, hello, my name is Steve. And then they get him in and he's like, my name's not Steve.
And thought,
You
Steve,
know, my name's not Steve. And he's relaxed. And I feel that's what people do. They come on and they're like, "Hi, my name is Jess. I am a
Mhm.
fitness business." Like, all right,
Yes.
that's not you, probably. Let's take away that and
Mhm.
let's just see what's happening here. No judgment here. You know, it's like,
No judgment. So if I needed to take a printer or a fax machine out into the yard and beat it with a baseball bat, all
right.
that
Yeah,
days, be good to
that's
go.
right. It's such a great movie. Just like
That is a
DC
great
Love Letter. It's like
and so the fact that we're quoting it, I don't even know how old that movie is.
it's pretty old, actually. I was digging that when I was in college, like 20 plus years ago. Still
Such
a
a good
classic, though. You see, this is what happens when you know the script. You just riff on stuff. We're like, oh, Office Space. Yeah, that's right.
Office Space. Yeah.
You know,
That's
you
a
have the
great one, though.
37 pieces of flair, you know, it's just like, you can't.
And people are still using that as a meme of especially the boss, right? Like
boss.
everywhere.
Everyone feels that, oh, the overbearing boss, the
Mhm.
micromanaging boss.
Yeah.
This guy over there has all this flair, and I see you're not doing the same thing. I want to encourage you to. Well,
Everyone has that. Everyone has that in their history. They know how to relate to what that feels like in the moment of just like pure aggravation.
right. Everyone has a Lumberg that they've had in their life. It's, oh, Lumberg. Geez. Like,
Oh, and a fax machine that they have thrown out the window.
right. The
We all
TPS
have it.
reports.
Absolutely.
So it's in some ways, I feel like that's the fitness industry, though. We're like the TPS report. We've just like, whenever I walk a trade show floor, sometimes it feels like to me, it's like, oh, rinse, repeat. You
Mhm.
know, it's like same old stuff. Oh, another version of a spin bike.
Yeah, it's highly underwhelming. And the body does a limited amount of things. It does 5 really good movement patterns. It's very limited in what it does. It's essentially a cupcake, and then you're just deciding what flavor and icing and toppings that you wanna go on this same cupcake over and over again.
That
And
was
but
good.
it's true, right? And but it's not about, like, how to decorate it. It's
Yeah.
instead about, like, how to make sure everybody gets some.
Yeah. And I think that's like this disruption thing. Wouldn't it be great to go to like a trade show floor? It was just wildly different stuff than you've ever seen before. It was just,
I would
wow.
be so
Like,
excited.
it's so that and just literally all the stuff that would help you, actually help you, not
Mhm.
just gadgets and getting swag that you take back because you're like, oh, I want free stuff.
What are you doing with it really? You get home with your free stuff and it disappears into the trash,
Yeah,
and
junk it. It's wasteful.
it's super so if we instead, again, go back to that conversation of, like, how can we collaboratively work with sister companies and bring them into our space, or better yet, how do we infiltrate their space so that you
Yes,
are walking around a trade show, seeing things that are interesting to you because it directly influences your business.
most definitely. Wow, look at this. Time exploded by for us, Jess. It was like just booming by. What a
I love it.
conversation. Thank you so much for giving me your time, which is the most valuable thing to me, that you gave me some of that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad that we crossed paths at IDEA, and I got to be on your podcast a year later.
And the great thing is you said what you wanted. When I saw you at Idea, you're like, hey, just get on this podcast here. And
Let's
you
do
know
this
what?
thing.
Let's do this thing. And I was like, you know what? I like when people pursue stuff. I really am a big fan of that. And I remember after I met with you, I got on my phone and I wrote a note. I'm going to get back to Jess about this because I don't remember anything unless I write it on my email. Nothing, right to the head. And that's when you got a message from me. After that, I was like, gotta make sure I follow through on
I'm
this.
the exact same way. I'm a huge advocate of the fact that your brain is for thinking through problems, not remembering problems. And so if you can get the things out of your head in whatever space works for you, writing it down works for me. I also have an online to-do list that when you're in the moment, you can type it in that way, but get it out of your brain because if it just stays there, it's either never going to happen or it's going to take you down that tunnel where you've suddenly squirreled out on this thing that should have taken 15 minutes, now 15 hours. So get it out of your brain. Your brain's for thinking.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think I've ever heard that before. That is magic. That's incredible. Your brain's for thinking, not for remembering. The new
Mhm.
things. Gee, we'll have obviously your stuff in the show notes, but to cap it off, what's a good way people can learn more about you, Jess, and your words of wisdom here?
I would love for you to follow me on Instagram. I'm JHM Fitness. So it's just my initials. There is a photographer out there with my name. And so she already had hijacked my Jessica Maurer. And so I've
Yeah.
got to put my H in there so I stand out. Or you can find me on my website at Jessica H. Maurer or jhmfitness.com.
There it is. Jessica, Jess, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was really fun.